All right, back at it, Jim. Bright and early. Good morning. Happy Tuesday.
Good morning, Matt. I'm delighted to be here.
As am I. So we are ramping up a series of events, of discussions, of content, specifically around issues germane to enterprise CMOs. You and I have been involved just as a reset for folks who may be joining us new to this series. CMO Coffee Talk community, exclusive group of CMOs, been around for about 3 years. Great ongoing conversations. Jim Williams, who's the CEO or CMO, maybe future CEO, we'll see, CMO right now of Uptempo, came to us a couple months ago and said, like, let's ramp up what we're doing for enterprise CMOs in particular. Let's increase the discourse around some of the same topics, but that have very different meanings and implications in the enterprise. And so we've been doing some Zoom get-togethers of CMO and enterprise CMOs, lots of interesting discussions in the Slack community. If you are watching this either live or on demand, if you're an enterprise CMO and want to be part of that, definitely let us know. We'll put a link into the comments here so you can join that enterprise CMO community. But I think this is the second or third, Jim, of these LinkedIn Lives we've done specifically on enterprise CMO events with a couple topics in mind and some actual enterprise CMOs who can come and sort of share this with us. So first of all, Jim and Uptempo, thanks very much for being here and being part of it.
You got it. Love it. I love the conversation. I learn from all the conversations from my peers. Take great notes and try and share insights as much as I can from these. So thanks for having us. It's great.
So this is a LinkedIn Live. It's not a Zoom, so it won't be quite as interactive as we usually do. But if you are watching and participating in this live, encourage you to contribute, to share, to ask a question, to provide a comment in the chat. We'll bring that up, and either Jim or I can address it, or our guest today can address it as well. But we want to get right into it. Jim, our guest today, who's going to share a little bit, he's coming in so casual on a Tuesday morning, he refuses to put his last name on his profile here. But very excited to have Greg Boosin from Mastercard joining us for this session today. Greg, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Matt and Jim. By the way, I'm not the CMO of Mastercard. I do report to the CMO. I run B2B and product marketing, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Well, when we were chatting earlier about this topic of sort of, this how does marketing support sort of the sales motion and how does marketing support revenue objectives? I mean, it's a universal sort of topic when you get into lead gen and sales enablement and other elements, but it takes on a whole nother level of complexity at enterprise. So before we get into some of the broader questions, maybe just introduce sort of your role and sort of the focus you have in sort of driving revenue impact at Mastercard.
Yeah, appreciate that, Matt. The first tenet we live by is that marketing strategy follows business strategy, and Mastercard, for those that are paying attention, we are on a significant long-term journey. We actually are over a third of our revenue now comes from services. So there are great little factoids like, did you know that Major League Baseball uses our solutions to secure voting in the All-Star game? So it's the fans that vote and not the bots. Disaster relief organizations leverage us to get funds to disaster victims before the boots hit the ground. Some quick serve restaurants use our personalization services to personalize their digital menu boards. So we do a lot more than the card. And I'm happy to talk more about that. But that business strategy of diversification has significant implications on the marketing organization, where historically, we were a brand building organization. Then we became, on top of that, an organization that was selling solutions we were known for to customers we've been doing business with. So, if you look at our filings, we do business with 22,000 financial institutions and merchants around the world. So terrific. To now needing to sell solutions we are not known for to customers with whom we have not done business. So we built a sales enablement organization. Happy to talk about that. We've built an organization where marketing is actually part of the value proposition of doing business with our customers. So that'd be number 2. And now number 3, we've made almost 20 acquisitions in the last 4 years, building a lead gen organization at scale. And I think each of those has interactions with the sales force that are worth digging into. So sales enablement, being part of the value prop, and then lead generation.
Yeah, I mean, tons obviously to discuss. It's not a 3-hour show, so we're gonna have to pick some spots in there.
I'll take the hint and shorten my comments.
No, it's all good. I mean, look, I'll stick around. I got nothing to do today. We just keep on going. We mentioned earlier on, you mentioned sort of this 3-legged stool of kind of focus areas for you. And as I took notes, I had at least 7 or 8 legs there. So we're gonna pick and choose like some areas to go deep dive there. No, it's not a math problem. It's fine. But like, I think that the first tool you mentioned was lead gen, and that sometimes is the one that like we all sort of say, oh, that's what marketing does. I want to put that aside for now because I want to get into the sales enablement conversation, which, as you said earlier, is not always the sexiest part of what marketing does. But I could argue in a complex sales motion and an enterprise selling, I think could be the most important part.
Yeah.
So I've got some, I want to go deep in a couple areas, but want to maybe just have you start like, what is your sales enablement strategy overall? Like, how do you approach that?
Well, let me start with what the objective is. And the objective is to create a confident and conversant sales force, which we have 2 significant measures on an annual basis here. One, a survey of the sales force. How confident are you in having at least initial conversations in the solutions we have to sell? Number one. And number 2, what's the pipeline of the group of solutions that we've trained on based on those materials versus the control? And I can tell you in both those measures, we've made significant progress. We've gone from almost maybe just less than half of those being confident in the solutions they have to sell to now that number is approaching 90%. And on an annual basis, the pipeline versus the control is such a vast difference. It's almost unbelievable, but backed up by the data in Salesforce.
Greg, it's super interesting. So the confidence makes sense. I love that idea. Actually, I might steal that idea. How about conversant? How do you? Yes, pipeline, I guess, is the ultimate measure of whether it's conversant. But how do you assess?
Yeah, so there's a training element to this, and we're about to go deep. So Matt, just sort of like pull your ear if I'm taking too long here. Give me the sign. We have significant partnership with what we call sales excellence. It's sort of a centralized discipline group, and that gives us, one contact point with sales, and they have one contact point with marketing, even though we each have diffused organizations plugged into regions and business units. And they work with the different regions. Now, please understand that Mastercard's a heavily matrixed organizations between regions, sub-regions, and then global business units. And so, look, the rubber hits the road, the P&Ls are in the regions. So sales excellence goes and gets the priority solutions from the regions that are going to make up their, coming 12 months revenue targets. Then they set up a training calendar. And then we make sure that the materials are either refreshed or net new a few weeks ahead of those trainings, so that in those trainings, there actually is a certification process to get to your point about conversancy. Whatever, we'll go with it. How conversant they are actually tested. The Salesforce actually at the end is tested and has to submit a video of them speaking back the content, and they're given the check mark.
That's great.
So just for those of you keeping track at home, conversancy, actual word. Greg's, as informal as he is way ahead of us vocabulary wise. So thanks we learn a little. See, this isn't
liberal
just
arts for the win.
Show. It's also prepping you for spelling bee. So we talk about sales enablement strategy and playbooks, which is great. But if you stop there, you may or may not see results. Can you talk about activation? Like, what does it take? What has been successful at Mastercard in taking a great strategy and playbook and landing the plane so it's being followed on a Tuesday?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this. And for those watching, we did not prep on this, but this is just got into my sweet spot. We launched something that we named Foundational Sales Materials. And this is, when I was a salesperson, which I was before I took the role in product marketing and then B2B marketing, I was the one complaining that, sometimes I'm getting a 2-page deck, sometimes I'm getting a 10-page deck, sometimes I'm getting a 300-page deck. and it was just the experience for the salesperson was miserable. So we have another true north here, which is, as marketers, the salesperson is in this conversation we're having, is the customer for us. And so what is it that we can do to smooth their experience? And so with foundational sales materials, we created squads. And I mentioned that we're a matrixed organization. In each squad, without going into too much detail, is product people and marketing people, both from the globe and from the region, and then a salesperson, which is, by definition, is from the region. And we've scaled this quickly by doing a set of sales materials, and I'll go into the discipline in a second, but you do it for a lead region, and then you cut off the regional people, and you go find three people, a product person, a marketing person, a salesperson in region number 2, and you're bringing to them, ideally, materials that are 80% done. By the way, they're almost 100% done if the needs of the customer are the same, the competition's the same, the trends are the same, because the positioning can be the same, and you just need to go find data points that prove it out in that region. And so we actually went from 0 to over 300 sets of foundational sales materials in just about a year, based on that construct of leveraging to scale. The materials themselves are 10 to 15 pages, no more than that, for the external presentation. They follow the hero's journey, and we have the checkbox of, did you, in the brief, or have you actually fulfilled that, there's competitive differentiation, the things that sometimes get left out because product sort of shrugs. So we put that policing in the upfront. So hopefully I gave you a few directions to go in there. The people, the process.
Yeah. So
by the way,
just
I'll make one more comment, Jim. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not allowed to get posted to our sales enablement website until such time that the salesperson says, this is good enough for my brothers and sisters.
Okay. Interesting. Very good. So given the size of the organization, size of the mandate, and the regional territories and all those P&Ls, like, is this enablement effort is it like it's like how they paint the Golden Gate Bridge, they just keep painting, they get to one side.
It's a great point. Yeah.
Like, is it continuous, like all year long?
It is, because one of the biggest complaints when we headed into this scaling was, and it was me complaining, the content's not fresh, right? Yeah. So you've got to keep it fresh. And so we were just yesterday having our periodic update on what's the vintages of, what's a quarter old, 6 months old, over a year old, and updating it based on the priorities. Yeah. So each one in the system actually has a product owner and a marketing owner, and the system, and I know that not everyone has, scaled systems like this, but it sends auto reminders if you're the owner of this material and it requires update, which, as you would imagine, still requires us to chase people.
Right. Vintage, not good in this case.
That's right. We're not talking wine and scotch. Right? 18 years is bad in this case.
Right.
You talked a lot about the process side. I want to get into the people side a little bit, right? Because when you change how people are doing work, it's not automatic that they understand why and that they're comfortable with change. And a lot of times people, when you ask them to change what they're doing and change their status quo, there's an element of fear that goes into that, fear of not knowing how to do it right, fear of not being good at it right away, fear of what that's going to mean about their job and everything else. So there's the activation from a process standpoint. Talk about the culture change required in making this work.
We're going back several years.
Yeah,
we're going back several years, but the conversations that I was having with my sales excellence counterpart, when we were sort of planning this out and, getting the engine revving, was we'd look at each other and be like, wow, this is actually nothing short of culture change. And at scale, that can be really difficult. I'm going to make up my answer, Matt, but number one, we focus on the objectives. So I said, here's the true north. You treasure what you measure. Here are the objectives numerically that we're going after, so we know whether we're successful or not. Yeah. That was number one. Number two is consistency of message. Number three is the training. And so it was, that actually, for the salespeople, that was in their scorecards of did they attend the trainings, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they see the value in it. So there's assuming they do, there's no hardship in getting them to attend. And then on the marketing side, it actually created clarity where there previously hadn't been.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of the marketers in the regions actually thank us for doing this, because it gave clarity as to not only what they're supposed to do, but what they're not supposed to do. Right? Everything else fell off because they were trying to please the organization and constantly churning out more videos, more sales materials. So it was like they felt, they would say they were the deli counter, right? And constantly taking those orders. And this gave the structure to the discipline, or to their days. And then we gave them the training, because the real art of the sales enablement isn't the color by numbers of fill in what your competitive differentiation is, fill in the pricing, fill in your roadmap. The real art of it is, who's the target? What are their needs? What's the value that we are proposing? And then how do you go from that, differentiated benefits on one hand versus cost, risk, and effort required on the other, and then turn that into a positioning. And then turn that into messaging. And that's the real art of it. And now, as we have so many solutions, the art is, how do you do it in a really customer-focused standpoint? So it's not, we're not a product organization, we're a segment needs-focused organization. And that's the next trick in terms of culture change, to go back to your original.
So let's say all of that is successful. You've gotten all that rolled out. I have yet to see a program with this level of sort of complexity be rolled out and be perfect, right? Like so once you hit the battlefield, especially, as you people execute it over time, what's this process for review and iteration? Also a real word, I looked it up, sort of to make sure that this stays relevant, not just by making adjustments to what the field sees as a better way of doing it, but making adjustments over time as your market changes, as your customer changes. Over time.
I love the question. I think the quote you were looking for was a Mike Tyson quote, not a guy I think that gets quoted often, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face the first time.
Right. That's right.
Right. So look, yes, the sales materials continue to evolve. You find out that people are using one element much more than another element. Coming from an analyst and investor relations background, I'm a huge believer in FAQ documents. So they tend to be quite organic. The things that are priorities tend to stay priorities. And so there's a bit of, constant updating of those. And we've changed the discipline. We had 4 deliverables. We're now down to 3 because, we changed that. In terms of foundational sales materials, we added a deeper double click on, let's call them advanced sales materials. I don't love the name, but it's like, okay, beyond the initial conversation, what do you do when the experts come in? How can they have modular sales enablement? And then there were a couple other things that I'll mention that we added. As you continue to survey the sales force, they're like, well, actually, could we get a demo? So we created a sales demo app for a specific situation when we're talking to segment A or segment B, which demonstrates across our org structure all the elements of what we can bring to bear in the context of how it might show up. Let's just take banks for a second. How it might show up in a banking app to their consumers. So you're showing them instead of telling them. Right. The foundational sales materials are a lot of telling. The demos are showing. And then deeper down the funnel, we actually started an RFP factory, which I think is a bit of a competitive advantage for us, but it pretty much uses artificial intelligence on a single repository that's self-learning, which has been terrific. And so they're constantly getting, if you consider that enablement, they're constantly getting that support from us. And we're constantly building our credibility with them as salespeople. We're not just the people that put out priceless ads, although those are terrific and help them win business as well.
And you're on a journey of, did you say 20 acquisitions? I don't know if you said the time period. So you're constantly trying to fold a new culture into this existing system, right? Like how much, if you think about all the challenges of building and maintaining this program you have, how much is the newbies, like the freshman class, how much of a challenge is that?
It's a challenge, and much more so it's an opportunity. Look, what really turns me on in my work life is building something that didn't previously exist. Like that's awesome for me to be able to build a sales enablement organization and now build an organization that is, or help be part of building an organization that is to fuel the future growth of Mastercard's business strategy. So for me, that's what gets me up in the morning, and I'm saying that with great sincerity. I would alter your question, Jim, though. I'm not trying to fold into the old. I'm trying to use the talent and the capabilities that come in to build new muscles, right? And that is challenging because, the acquisitions come in and they're like, we're amazing at, let's say, lead gen, which they are, because that's how they've gotten themselves to a point where they've been acquired. But they don't see the core of MasterCard as amazing as that. At that. So you need to get people on board with the vision of, well, wait a minute, we can be better together. If this is all, it's a branding conversation. We want to be a house. We want to be a branded house, not a house of brands. The MasterCard, brand can and will mean so much more than, I think, a card in your pocket. And then the web work that needs to happen, and then the sales enablement work, and then the capabilities at scale. So it's a challenge. You need to sell people. You need to move from being a manager to being a leader in order to get that done.
Almost everything we've addressed so far, has a change and a culture management element to it. And I think, the idea of saying when there's M&A involved, saying this is about improvement, not assimilation, is really, really important to sort of managing the human side of, I think when your 100%. Company has been acquired, it can that can be a successful exit for some people, but for a lot of employees, well, we just lost, right? We lost because we're not going to we're going to get assumed into the Borg. And so to be able to come in and say, no, the opposite is true. We bought you because you bring something special that we don't have that we want. So we can't kill that. We need to leverage that. So we need you to help us be good at what you are good at. Not only is that what you probably want in the beginning anyway, but it also helps motivate the employees to stay engaged and sort of help drive that process.
You've nailed it. And again, I spend most of my time thinking and acting on exactly this point. First and foremost, we're here for the business. So we don't want to do anything to disrupt making the business case of the acquisition, right? So, the first thing we do is we bring gifts. Here are things that we have centrally, and we have somewhat of a shared services model that I've alluded to some of, that we bring them, hey, we can help you do this more effectively. We can help you do this more efficiently without disrupting you. So that's sort of motion one. Motion two is come on into the family and be part of something bigger. Now, I find that people fall into three buckets. You're either a person that's super excited because you're now part of Mastercard marketing and communications, and you see the opportunity to learn and be a part of something bigger and have a career and impact that can take you around the world in a variety of different roles. That's one side. On the other extreme is I'm a small company person. I want to be nimble. This is going to work for the Death Star. And I want to be, I want to be fast and nimble and have that, gargantuan upside. By the way, there's plenty of upside financially coming to work for Mastercard if anyone's interested. Then there are the people, and they're going to self-select themselves out eventually. Then there are the people in the middle that are on the fence, and they're like, we're going to wait and see what happens. And that's where you got to put your effort and make sure that they see the career path and see the training and see the opportunity for themselves to have the significant impact as opposed to become part, just a cog in the machine. And as a leader, that means you got to reach out to every one of them and put your hand at their back. Sorry.
I think that was a creative way of getting around the no pitch rule, Jim, by sort of soliciting employment, which is not pitching, but not really pitching. But I'm here for it. I think it's good. We've got just a few more minutes here with Greg Boosin from Mastercard. Great discussion so far. I don't know how many legs of the stool we're down, but the one I still have an unchecked box around is sort of measures and reporting, right? So I think I love the way you're talking about your enablement approach and sort of activation. What's the scorecard look like for this? Like, how do you know it's working?
So this is something we've spent a lot of time on, putting numbers where there aren't necessarily numbers, and understanding that sometimes those numbers ladder up to other numbers. So you got to find something that's significant enough for the business to care about, but also close enough in such that we can draw a correlation between our efforts and those direct results. And so, yes, of course, We have the traditional funnel metrics on the lead gen side. I know you said you wanted to put that aside. I've already mentioned, the sales enablement measures that we're talking about. Each of our shared services then also has measures on a continual basis. So I mentioned RFPs. How many RFPs? What's your internal customer satisfaction score? How long did it take you to pump it out? And that's, there's tension in there. You can do it fast and bad, your customer satisfaction score is going to go down. And so we try to use that kind of methodology across the board on each of the things that we're driving.
That's great.
Of course, win rate, assuming it, the Salesforce has put the RFP in Salesforce. We can talk about Salesforce behavior inside of Salesforce another time.
Right. Totally.
So,
and I love this whole conversation because, Matt talked a little bit about what we're trying to do with the CMO coffee talk and get much more of a enterprise level conversation. And we recently had a conversation and it was focused on sales and marketing alignment. And kind of one of the key takeaways I had from that conversation was like 30, 35-ish CMOs was so far beyond pipeline. Actually pipeline's pretty good. There's really good alignment there. It's all these other areas where the alignment could have some friction, et cetera. And not the least of which is, it came up multiple times, this notion of sales enablement. So I love the focus of this conversation. It's a really good complement to that dialogue.
That's great.
So, Greg, before we run out of time, we do have one audience question. Got a question here from Susie around how do enterprise organizations stay innovative? It's really easy to sort of build, plan, process, deploy, be successful. But I think the balancing large company success with agility and innovation can be a challenge. Just curious if you have a perspective on that.
Great. I very much do. First of all, Susie, thanks for sticking around for 27 minutes. That's awesome of you, assuming you haven't dropped after asking the questions. So look, I once got a talking to from my boss, and he said to me, Greg, every quarter you're coming in and you're telling me, this incremental improvement, that incremental improvement. He goes, that's Kaizen. I'm like, yes, I know the word. The opposite word, or the complementary word to Kaizen, is Kaikaku, which I had to go look up, by the way. Liberal arts did not teach me that. And that's the step function change. And so I have a portfolio of initiatives to advance the discipline. Some of them are Kaizen, some of them are Kaikaku. And it goes like this. Historically, rearview mirror, how are you using artificial intelligence in B2B marketing? Right? And this was a question from 3-4 years ago. The answer ended up being, as I've already given you, the RFP factory, and those kinds of things. Now I think that question, as artificial intelligence has moved on, that question evolves. But so we're always challenging ourselves. Maybe Susie, one way to do it is pick the technology, the bleeding technology of the day, and ask yourself, how do you use it? How do you use augmented reality? How do you use blockchain? How do you use artificial intelligence? And keep pushing that bleeding edge.
Very good.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to keep this at 30 minutes, so we're going to do so. Greg, thank you so much. I know you're super busy. Thank you for joining us and sharing your ideas. Thank you, Susie, for your questions. Greg and Jim, we're continuing this discussion well beyond this LinkedIn Live. If you are an enterprise CMO, head of marketing leader, want to join a more interactive version of this discussion, is happening every day in the CMO Coffee Talk Slack. There's a specific channel just for enterprise CMOs to have these conversations. We're doing monthly Zoom calls as well, getting just the enterprise group together. So CMO Coffee Talk meets every Friday. It's the entire membership. It's 300 plus CMOs with a topic. This week is about your first 100 days on the job. Last week we did generative AI best practices, so always a different topic. And then once a month we do a midweek Zoom that is just for the enterprise marketing leader. So if you interested in that, want to join some of those, have a link here, and we'll make sure we get that out to everyone as well. These go by fast, Jim.
They do. They go really fast, especially when we have a great guest. Greg, that was great.
Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Appreciate it. And I'm open to people reaching out if they want to talk further or have suggestions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Susie, and everyone for watching. We'll see you here again very soon. Take care. Have a great day.
You too. Have a good one.